We are here today because we are asking you, as the citizens of Lancaster County, and our brothers and sisters here in Lancaster City specifically, we're asking you to vote this Tuesday and to vote your conscience. We are here today because we want you to vote your conscience that's not just good for you, but it's good for your neighbors. It is good for the common good. We want you to think about your siblings that may look different than you, worship differently than you, have a different language than you. We want you to vote in a way that makes sure that each of us, all of us in this place, have an opportunity to live and to live well. We want you to vote. Your vote matters. We heard somebody earlier this week on the bus tour that was an elected official. They won their election by one vote. One vote. Your vote might make the difference. So we're asking you to make sure you get out and vote this Tuesday. We're asking you to not just vote, but then to show up and make sure those officials that you vote in, that they do the work that you've asked them to do. You want to make sure that you're calling in, that you're sending in postcards, that you're showing up at public meetings, that you're asking them to do the work that you sent them there to do, to make sure that all the issues that you care about for you and your family, for your community, for the students and your neighbors, that they do the work that is needed to make sure that this county, that this commonwealth is good for each person. We live in a commonwealth, not a state. And the root of that says that where we live needs to take into account the common good, the common health, the common wealth. And so we are asking you as Power Interfaith, as folks from a whole variety of faith traditions, to care about your neighbor. We're here today as Christian pastors. We're here today as imams responsible for their communities. We're here today with our sisters and brothers who are serving as rabbis. We're here today with folks from all sorts of different Christian traditions, because we believe that we as one people have the right to our own religion. We don't want a Christian nationalist nation. We do not want a Christian nationalist nation. I say that as a Christian pastor because here's the question. Which Christian church? Which one?
Right.
Is it the Catholic Church?
Right.
Is it the Methodist Church, the Presbyterian Church, the Lutheran Church?
Right.
I mean, if you decide that this is going to be a commonwealth just for one particular religion, which sect?
Right.
If you decide this is going to be a nation for only one particular race, that only white people deserve the right to vote, well, that's going to look good for me for a little bit as a person who happens to have light skin, but I tell you what, eventually they're going to find some other way to divide us up.
That's right.
They're going to decide that maybe it's not just white people that get to vote, but only white men. And then they're going to decide it's only white men that have so much power, so much land. We as Power Interfaith think that is not who we are as a Commonwealth. That is not who we are as Americans. Christian nationalism is neither Christian nor patriotic. We're here today to say that as siblings of various faiths, siblings of various skin tones, siblings of various languages and various backgrounds, that we all deserve a place in this Commonwealth, that we all deserve a place in this nation, and we're asking you as our siblings to gather together today to say that enough is enough. This space is for all of us, and there's more than enough for all of us. We do not need to fight over scraps. There's enough for us to share and to love. My God is big enough. My God is big enough to provide for all of us. We do not live in a place of scarcity. We live in a place of abundance and plenty. And I don't need to be stingy and to hoard things for myself. I get to share with my siblings. I get to share with you. And I'm asking you to come alongside us today as Power Interfaith to do this work together. It says there's space for all of us. Can you say that with me? There's space for all of us. There's space for all of us. There's enough for all of us. Love is for all of us. Let's love one another well. Let's vote well. Let's work well together. Let's make this Commonwealth, this nation, what it deserves to be, what it should be. A space for all of us. That's Power Interfaith. That's who we are. Amen?
All right, thank you, Jason. As a reminder, we're standing below the county office building for a reason. The county commissioners and the county election board last May, on the eve of the primary election, removed the only ballot drop box from a prominent public, easily accessible location. They took it away. That is an act of voter suppression. and we reject it. We stand here today to remind them that we are people who have the right to vote. And you can't take away that right from us. And so we have here a reminder of the drop box that they stole. That they need to put it back. They need to make voting rights accessible and easy for people in Lancaster County. Next, we'd like to hear from Rabbi Jack Paskoff from Congregation Sha'arai Shemayim. Jack?
All right. Good morning, Lancaster. Good morning, Power. I want to share some words with you that you all know.
Okay. Are you good? I'm good.
First, they came to the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist.
That's right.
Then they came to the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came to the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for anyone. We all know those words. They were written by German pastor Martin Niemöller. His words, though, were neither poetry nor prophecy. They were actually written in 1946, after World War II and after the Holocaust. They were his confession. In the early days of the Nazi Party, he was a Nazi supporter. He only turned away when elements of the church in Germany linked themselves with the Nazi Party. He saw the dangerous and destructive realities of this marriage between religion and politics, and finally spoke out, and it was too late for him. He spent years in Nazi prisons and concentration camps. Several weeks ago on the Jewish high holidays, I imagined Pastor Niemöller's words in a different way. Not a confession from me, but hopefully a call to action for all of us. These were the words I wrote for that occasion.
Thanks, Ed.
First, they came to the asylum seekers and refugees, but I didn't speak out because my grandparents came to this country when the doors were open to those who needed a safe harbor. Then they came for the women and girls who needed abortions, but I didn't speak up because I'm a man. Next, they came for the teachers who teach things like Mouse and the Diary of Anne Frank and A Wrinkle in Time and Harry Potter and other books that challenge us to think and feel, but I didn't speak up because I don't want my children to be upset by hard things. With their AR-15s, they came for the school children, but I didn't speak up because it wasn't in my town. When they came for black and brown Americans, I didn't speak up because I refused to see my own privilege being white. Then they came for the transgender students in sports, but I didn't speak up because I'm not an athlete. They came for the same-sex couples and the legality of their marriages, but I didn't speak up because I'm not gay. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for anyone.
All right.
You don't have to agree with every single issue I just cited, but today, here and now, for those who haven't spoken up already, we must say that we will raise our voices together in protest. And the easiest way to do that is to get out the vote. We stand in front of the county office building, but we might as well be standing on a playground with a bunch of fifth graders. Remember back to fifth grade, the 10-year-olds have agreed to a set of rules for a game. Everyone attests that the rules are fair until one side loses. Then even though everyone agreed, there are cries of cheating, whining that it's not fair, demanding that the rules be changed or we'll take our ball and go home. Act 77 was passed with bipartisan support until one side saw that the very act they helped create was not serving their partisan needs. Well, they say, they must have been cheating. Then, if we can't get rid of it, let's just make it harder. We'll get rid of the only drop box in the entire county, which was never really accessible to begin with. And then even if it's mailed back on time, let's look for dates on the envelope, and while we're at it, let's get rid of the act completely. Some states and some communities have taken even more draconian measures to keep people from voting. Today, we must say that we will do everything in our power to guarantee the sanctity of the right to vote, making it accessible for all. All voices must be heard. Today, we must collectively vow that we will never have to write our own confessions for our silence. Today, as one, we raise our voices in protest. We speak our truth. We, the people, must be heard today and on November 8th, and in the spring at the primaries, when there will likely be amendments to the state constitution on the ballot that threaten to dramatically curtail freedoms we have enjoyed in this state. And next November, when the contests are not nearly as dramatic, but no less important, we will not confess as Niemöller did. We will stand together, arm in arm, Christian, Muslim, atheist, and Jew, Buddhist, Hindu, and Sikh, and we will be heard. In the Torah, Moses commands Joshua, Chazak v'amatz, be strong and courageous. In Jewish tradition, 5 times a year, we say Chazak, Chazak, v'nitchazek, be strong, be strong. Let us strengthen each other. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may this be God's will, and may it be ours. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Jack. Next, we're going to hear from Reverend Jennifer Matson, who is the priest at St. Thomas Episcopal Church here in Lancaster.
Thank you. I'm going to tell you a story. There were 2 brothers who were fighting. And as brothers tend to do, the fight escalated. They started yelling. And their mom, who was in the room next door, heard them, and she came into the room and she said, "Boys, what are you fighting about?" And they kind of looked down and they said, "Well, there's only one cookie left, Mom. There's only one cookie left." And the mom was a Christian, and so she thought this is an opportunity to have a teaching moment. And so she says to her boys, "Boys, you're brothers, you're supposed to love one another. So boys, what would Jesus do? What would Jesus do?" And so they kind of put their heads down and they thought about it, and Mom left the room, and the older brother says to the younger brother, "Well, you be Jesus. You be Jesus." Now, I've told this story before, and typically when I tell it, there's a big laugh. It's meant to be funny. But this is not funny anymore, is it, friends? This is not funny. It is not funny when somebody misinterprets, misrepresents, and takes their faith for personal gain. We know what that looks like. We are living with that right now. Christian nationalism would tell us the lie that our God is small, that our God needs protecting, that our God somehow needs to be defended by laws for just a few. Christian nationalism would tell us the lie that our nation is small, that it is for a select, privileged few. And Christian nationalism would tell us to be afraid of our neighbors, of our differences. We know this is a lie. We know this is not the truth. This is not the way. That our God, in fact, is big. That our God is endless. That our God is love. That our nation is great, not because we are the same. Because we are enriched and enlivened by our differences. That is what still gives us the potential to be a great nation. But that depends upon the freedom of us being able to vote, of every vote counting. And so we are here gathered today to say that we will not be silent. We will not stand still. We will continue to advocate for that which is true, for love, for freedom, and for this nation that is waiting for us to continue to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Jennifer. So, I think we need to pause a minute and remind Lancaster that the folks in the county election board need to count all the votes. 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 Amen. That's right. That's right. They need to count all the votes. And we need to be vigilant in the week ahead. We need to pay attention, y'all, because Election Day is going to come on Tuesday.
Yes, sir.
And we're going to vote, right? If you haven't voted already, you're going to vote on Election Day. But we know that it's going to take some time for all the votes to get counted. And it's going to require some patience that some elected leaders and officials have not been able to show in the past.
Come on now.
We're going to need to demand that there be patience while all the votes get counted. And we need to stay vigilant when they start saying, we're not going to count any more votes. Right? Next, we're going to hear from Reverend Roland Forbes from Ebenezer Baptist Church. Rev Forbes.
Good morning. I first want to express my gratitude to be included. I'm on the mic. All right. Am I better now? All right. I want to thank God for the opportunity to be able to stand here with all of these great people and great advocates for justice. Some years ago, Dr. Martin Luther King stood and declared that the most segregated hour is the hour between 11 and 12 on Sunday morning, as it represents the church, that there are segregated congregations that declare that we serve one God. The scripture declares that there is but one God, one faith, one baptism. That's the Christian concept of who God is. But yet, we're standing here today fussing and creating havoc and segregation as it represents our voting rights and as it represents our God. There seems to be not a forward push, but rather a backward push. That power is more important than people. That representation of a narrow view is more important than being inclusive of a society that said that all men are created equal. There seems to be a push that will push us further apart. So no longer are we segregated on Sunday morning, but now it seems we're segregated every day of our lives. The news media will try to highlight that and declare unto us that democracy is at stake. Well, I'd like to push that just a little bit further. Our lives are at stake. Our way of life is at stake. Our children are at stake. We have a Supreme Court that's more bent on making sure that they are pleasing their political allies than pleasing the people of the United States. We are in trouble. And so we must come together. We must emphasize that the power does not lie in corporations. It does not lie in Donald Trump. It does not lie in Mitch McConnell. Nor does it lie even in the Congress itself. It lies in the hands of the people of the United States. All of us matter. And if we do not exercise our right, we're denying the sacrifices of our grandparents. My grandmother, some years ago, I grew up in Norfolk, Virginia. I grew up at 813 Whitehead Street. My grandmother's telephone was KI 56772. I attended First Baptist Church. I went to the Robert Gatewood School. I would go to the movies with my dad. And at the time I went to the movies with my dad, all the colored folks sat up top. We couldn't sit down the bottom. My grandmother would stand on the corner in downtown Norfolk, and she would wait for someone to come pick her up so that she could clean their houses. But my grandmother exercised one thing that she was very proud of. Whenever election day came around, she would fight her way to the election booth. There were things that would try to discourage her. There were people that would try to make her turn around. But she was determined to just exercise one right, because she felt that it was her right to exercise her vote. If we do not vote, we are stepping on those who sacrifice their life, sacrifice their mental state, sacrifice their tears, sacrifice all that they gave in order that we might have the right to vote. And so I just came by here to say, this is the day that the Lord hath made. We ought to rejoice and vote and be glad in it. God bless you.
Yes, this is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and vote. I love it. I love it. Next, we're going to have some song. We're going to have some song with Pastor Matt Carlson from Akron Mennonite Church. Pastor Matt.
Good morning, Lancaster. Ooh, this mic is hot. Wanted to share a song this morning, and this is a song that reminds us of the power and the mystery of our collective action. So this song is called One Voice by the folk trio The Waylon Jennings. If you know it, please help me out. And if you don't know it, you'll catch on quick, I think, to the melody, and you can do some humming along. We'll see how the mic picks this up. Sound of one voice, one spirit, one voice, the sound of one who makes a choice. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of one voice. Voices too, the sound of me singing with you, helping each other to make it through. This is the sound of voices too. This is the sound of voices too. The sound of voices three, singing together in harmony, surrendering the mystery. This is the sound of voices three. This is the sound of voices three. This is the sound of all of us, singing with love and the will to trust. Leave the rest behind, it will turn to dust. This is the sound of all of us. This is the sound of all of us. Sound of one voice, one people, one voice, a song for every one of us. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of one voice. Thank you.
Next, one of our partner organizations is here today, and I'd like to invite Susie Wirtz from Lancaster Stands Up to come over here this morning. Susie!
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. And I brought a lot of notes because I am not a pastor. Okay. So my name is Susie Wirtz. I'm an organizer with Lancaster Stands Up. We're a member-led grassroots organization building political power for working class people across Lancaster County, including working people like me. My kids and I have lived in Ephrata for over a decade, and I absolutely love Lancaster County. I love the people who call it home. But like so many of our neighbors, the last couple of years have not been easy. From 2016 to 2017, I experienced homelessness with my children. Because of a lack of resources, my kids and I lived at a women's shelter for 11 months before we were finally financially stable enough to find affordable housing. Moving to safe housing, the women's shelter saved my life, but it also changed my perspective. I learned about the power of community. I learned about the value of policies that put working people first and how important it is to look out for each other. Watching other women like myself start over with nothing but the clothes on our backs instilled in me a sense of solidarity that has carried over into my work as an organizer. And my story is not unique. All over Lancaster County, families like mine work really hard to make sure our bills get paid on time. We go to work every day to provide for our kids. We make sure they get dropped off at school. We worry about what to make for dinner. We do what is necessary to keep a roof over our heads, and we hope that someday our kids will have it better. Everyday people like us put in the work to make our community a better place. We also know the value of civic involvement, and many of us in this park have put in hours knocking doors and showing up at public meetings and holding our elected officials accountable. This year, with the midterm elections right around the corner, we're knocking doors. I'm sure all of you are knocking doors around the clock, making phone calls to make sure that our neighbors get out to vote. It should be enough to vote and do the work many of us do to encourage others in our community to vote. But sadly, we also need to make sure our votes are counted. While we're making sure our communities are heard this election day, right-wing extremists and Christian nationalists across our Commonwealth are working actively to suppress the vote. They're scheming to abuse our legal system in order to throw out our ballots. And right here in Lancaster County, our commissioners, Josh Parsons and Ray D'Agostino, have made it clear their intentions to make voter harder, not easier, for working people. In May, they removed our only ballot drop box just one day before the primary elections, despite widespread public opposition. Last weekend, they met with election deniers, QAnon conspiracy theorists, and insurrectionists at an event in Manheim, Pennsylvania. This election day, we are unyielding in our resistance to the poisonous ideologies that Commissioners Parsons and Ray D'Agostino have sadly been embracing. We reject the malicious rhetoric that is Christian nationalism. It is nothing more than a misguided and corrupt form of the teachings Jesus of Nazareth stood for. But we're not working for a world in which we have the bare minimum, opposing dangerous ideologies and demanding that voting is accessible for everyone is only the beginning. So what are we fighting for? We're fighting for communities that are safe and thriving, where our elderly neighbors don't have to worry about whether or not they'll be able to keep the lights on. And where parents of small children don't have to worry about missing work because they can't afford childcare. We are fighting for a world where all of our kids get quality educations at schools that are well funded and have resources. We are fighting for health care that allows us to access care when we need it the most, and health care that protects our bodily autonomy. We are working towards a world in which all of us belong, in which voices of working people are heard, and in which every vote is counted. And I want to leave you with some verses that have become some of my favorites in this past year, from Ephesians 6. Finally, my brethren and sisters, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Like then, our struggle today is not against flesh and blood, but against the powers and the rulers who abuse their authority. We get through this struggle by standing together, by getting ourselves organized into a people-powered force that cannot be stopped. This election day, we're voting for our freedom, our dignity in the workplace, and for our children's future, and for the safety of our communities. We know that these things are up to us, and we're ready to do what it takes to build a Lancaster for all of us.
Who is Lancaster for? All of us. Who is Lancaster for? All of us. Who do they work for? All of us. Amen. Thank you, Susie, for being with us today. Next, we're going to hear from Pastor Doug Hill, retired Methodist pastor, who's been working tirelessly in our efforts at Power Interfaith Lancaster toward fair funding in public education. Pastor Doug.
Thank you. I'm Pastor Doug, and I live here in Lancaster on the west side of town, just a little bit over here. And when I walk downtown in the morning, I often pass Fulton Elementary School, which is just around the corner here, about 3 blocks. And when I do, I see the little children getting ready for a day at school. You know the ones I mean. You know those little kids that their backpack is almost as big as they are? You know who I'm. And these kids represent the beautiful diversity that we have here in the city of Lancaster. I see these kids jumping around, excited for another day at school. And I see their parents, their mothers and fathers and grandparents that are dropping them off with faces filled with hope, hoping that these children will get the education they need to find a way in this difficult and complicated world. And I know that these students in the school district of Lancaster will encounter some really great teachers, teachers that are highly skilled, teachers that care, teachers that are compassionate. And I also know from my work with Power Interfaith that the students in the school district of Lancaster will not have the same educational opportunities as they have in some of the surrounding districts. Effective and equitable educational funding is something that we continue to strive for. It is an expression of systemic racism in our state, and we are working to eliminate that. And this funding gap affects the future of our children. And with this current election, we've reached a critical moment, the future of education in the state of Pennsylvania. There are forces that oppose public education and would further take money out of the educational budget and funnel it into private schools. We can't let that happen. This would further diminish the educational possibilities of our children in the city of Lancaster and in other places around the state. And the future of our children is also threatened by the scourge of white Christian nationalism, which limit the religious expression of all people. White Christian nationalism is built on fear and on mistrust of those that are different. White Christian nationalism would limit the religious expression of the children in our schools. They must grow up in a place of peace and acceptance. The future of our children is also being threatened by the rise of fascism in our county and in our state and in our country. There are forces that are attempting to limit the vote right here in Lancaster County. You've heard it. They removed the drop box, making it more difficult for some people to vote. These forces would limit voting to just their side. And one official running says that they would decertify elections with which they did not agree, tossing out the ballots, the votes of American citizens. Our children's future is threatened by fascism in the United States. As I close, I want to bring your attention back to our children. Picture them, if you will, right now. They're going through another day at school. What kind of future awaits them? Will it be a future with diminished educational possibilities? Will it be a future with environmental destruction and unchecked climate disaster? Will it be a future where elections are controlled by the powerful? Will it be a future of division and separation? Or will it be a future where all people get to participate and all people are welcomed at the table? In this election, we have a clear choice for a free and wonderful future for our children. God bless.
Thank you, Pastor Doug. Next, we're going to bring up the Reverend Dawn Harmon from Global United Fellowship. Pastor Dawn, are you in the house? Here she is. Come on, Pastor Dawn.
All right. I agree with everything that's been said thus far. And we know this is the right crowd. So we thank God today that he's not a Democrat, nor a Republican, nor independent. That's God right. Is just God. Yes, and with that, we say he's sovereign over everything. Yes. And therefore, we can declare that that Christian nationalism is a counterfeit. It doesn't fit with what God is saying. Well, unlike true Christianity, it's based on hate and separatism, while true Christianity is based on love and inclusiveness. It's documented in the Bible. And the Bible is not a prop that you pick up and carry when you're crossing the street either. It's to be read. But it's documented in the Bible that God so loved this world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever, not whoever you choose, but whosoever believeth on him shall be saved. John 3:16. And it's equally important to note that God is love. By the way, that's in the book too, if you never read that. I'm speaking to a lot of people that are professing this Christian nationalism, but obviously they're not reading the book. Furthermore, 1 John 3:10 informs us that these are some of the traits of those who were followers of Christ. First of all, we know that we pass from death unto life because we love. It says we love the brethren. Yes. We love the humans. He or she that does not love their sister or brother abideth in death, and God declares in his word, you are a murderer. Well, murderer. Along with that, the same Bible says, how can you say you love a God that you've never seen and hate your human sisters and brothers that you see every day.
Make it plain.
Many of the current followers of this false religion used to sing songs like, Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world, red and yellow, black and white, they are precious in His sight. But today they did a remix. Jesus loves only our children. Jesus loves only us, the ones that look like us, the ones that vote like us, the ones that think like us. Otherwise, Jesus can't love them.
My Lord.
The devil is a liar.
Come on here.
But to fit into this current race-hating, bloodthirsty culture, they've changed the words of the song and you only sing for your crowd. I must ask you the same question that Paul asked the Apostle Paul. I know you read about him or you heard about him, for those of you who don't really read him. But he says, who has bewitched you? You know better, and so you ought to do better. Who has bewitched you? You was trained up to tell your children to play fair and to play and share. And now, if they're teenagers and now you're much older, you're telling them they have to hate the very classmates that you used to bring treats to for school. Something's wrong with that. You sound like a schizo-critzo. You're not a Christian, you're a schizo-critzo. That's what you are.
My Lord.
Along with that, I must ask the question, where are the preachers? The preachers and the voices that speak and preach against this kind of false gospel. Many of them are what I call closet Christians. Hiding in the closet, but agreeing and not shaking their head when they see something wrong. Not condemning attacks on Speaker Pelosi's husband, not condemning attacks of violence in neighborhoods, not condemning attacks when people's voting rights are taken away, not condemning those things, but silently going along with them. You might get by, but you ain't gonna get away. God's watching you too. I must ask these questions because in the book of Obadiah, the first chapter, verse 12 says that to Edom, God says He will hold judgment against them because they stood by and watched the destruction of others in their own community. Does that sound familiar? We have some Edomites that's standing by watching the destruction of people's lives, destruction of people's rights, destruction of people's education in the same community, and not doing anything about it. And finally, in these desperate times for our nation, and I've been in the technical world for more than 30-something years, I can tell you that we are lagging, and we've been lagging for more than 20 years when it comes to technology in the United States. And therefore, we need all the help we can get, all hands on deck. In every race, in every gender, we need all hands on deck to compete with this world. We need doctors like Native American Dr. Susan LaFleche Picotte, who was the first Native American doctor who founded and built her own hospital without government funds. We need Hattie Lamar, inventor who did the current Wi-Fi system that we currently use. She laid the groundwork for that. We need black people like Dr. A.G. Gaston, who was a black inventor, who was the one whose gas mask got the people out of the mine when they were trapped there. If it wasn't for them, they would have died and perished. We need these things. We need people like Dr. Patricia Bath, a black woman who many of you have had cataract surgery, but never thought it's a black woman whose procedure that you're using to do that with. She invented today's modern way of removing cataracts. We need Stephen Chen, Stephen Chen, an Asian American, one of the inventors of YouTube. You ever heard of that? We need all hands on deck when it comes to technology if we're going to stay solvent in this United States of America. Because I guarantee you, nowadays it's even hard to find a good plumber. God bless you.
Amen.
Thank you, Don. At this time, we'd like to hear from Pastor Devin Jeffers at the First Reformed United Church of Christ in downtown Lancaster. Pastor Devin.
Come on, repeat this after me. Say, your vote, is your voice. Your vote, is your voice. Your vote, your vote, your vote is your voice. Isaiah chapter 10 verses 1 and 2 says, "Doom to you who legislate evil, who makes laws that make victims, laws that make misery for the poor, that rob my destitute people of their dignity, exploiting defenseless widows, taking advantage of homeless children." Your vote, your voice. The 15th Amendment says that the rights of citizens of the United States their vote will not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of their race, color, or previous condition of servitude. The Voting Rights Act is widely considered to be the most important achievement of the civil rights movement, and yet in recent years it has been gutted by the U.S. Supreme Court. All federal and state elected officials should support the immediate restoration of the preclearance provision of the Voting Rights Advancement Act that was struck down by the court, including a revised preclearance formula that would protect against contemporary voter suppression efforts. Laws that create photo ID requirements, that roll back early voting and other measures to make the right to vote more accessible, suppressed individual rights to vote, especially among youth, people of color, women, LGBTQ, and the elderly. All elected officials, I said all elected officials, I said all elected officials should oppose such laws. All elected officials should support legislation to overturn the Citizens United decision. And that decision was to roll of corporate monies into elections and distort the representation of our democracy. Racial and partisan gerrymandering do not belong or do not allow people of color to elect candidates of their choice. Moreover, it turns democracy on its head by allowing elected officials to select their own voters instead of being in reverse. We as people here in Pennsylvania have to stand up and make sure that our voices are heard next Tuesday. I said we have to make sure our voices are heard next Tuesday. For the Bible reminds us, what shall we say to these things? The injustice, the things that are trying to take away the rights for men and women and boys and girls. What shall we say to these things? If God, not Republican, not Democrat, not independent, if God be for us, who can be against us? And so what is at stake? I'm glad you asked. Voting rights are under attack nationwide as states pass voter suppressing laws. And these laws lead to significant burdens for eligible voters trying to exercise their fundamental constitutional right. Since 2008, states across the country have passed measures to make it harder for Americans, particularly black people, the elderly, and students, and people with disabilities to exercise their fundamental right to cast their votes. That is why we are here. We are not here for form nor fashion, but power, inner faith, and the ACLU stand and engage in advocacy and litigation across the country to get rid of these harmful voter suppression measures once and for all. And so I say it again, your voice is your voice. Your vote is your voice. Your vote, your vote, your vote is your voice.
Woo, woo, woo. My voice.
Thank you, Pastor Devin Jeffers.
Yeah.
Next, we'd like to hear from Rabbi Mordecai Liebling from Power Interfaith in Philadelphia. Rabbi Mordecai.
Shalom, salam, peace, good morning.
Good morning.
So, folks who've been standing in the sun or too hot, you can move into the shade. Folks standing in the shade, you can move into the sun. Everybody move around a little. We've been standing in the same place for the last half hour. Move your legs up and down, stretch your arms, jump up and down. Get the blood moving. Switch up your perspective. Say hello to your new neighbor. So I want to take a little risk this morning and talk in a slightly different manner than some of the other previous speakers. We live in a time of radical uncertainty. We don't know what is going to happen. We don't know if democracy is going to survive in the form we have it or not. We don't know what the climate is going to be next year. We live in the time of the greatest uncertainty probably in our lives. So what can we get from living in a time of uncertainty? There are 5 gifts, perhaps, of uncertainty. 1, we can live in the present moment. 2, we can take the power of intention. 3, we can befriend our pain. 4, we can have solidarity with all our relations. And 5, we can understand the immensity and importance of the moment that we are living in. Yes. What do I mean when I say the present moment? The present moment frees us from constantly taking our temperature. Am I hopeful? Am I pessimistic? How do I feel? This is not about how we feel. When David was marching to Goliath, about to engage in battle, imagine if you would have tapped David on the shoulder and said, "David, how do you feel?" David would have said, "Get out of my way. I got a job to do," right? It's not about how we feel. It's not about how I wake up in the morning and feel that day. We have a job to do. That job is to make sure that fascism doesn't win in this country. That job is to make sure that white Christian nationalism doesn't win out. You know, uncertainty. A week before the Berlin Wall that fell, nobody thought the Berlin Wall was going to fall. A week or two before apartheid actually ended, nobody predicted that apartheid was going to end, that Nelson Mandela was going to be able to strike that deal. Nobody predicted that. People thought apartheid was going to last another 10 years. We don't know when that change is going to happen. Any moment, in every little act that we do contributes to that change. We don't know what the tipping point is, but we have no choice but to continue, not about how we feel, but what our values are and what our principles are. The second gift is the power of intention. It is that intention to make change that we say every morning. Don't take for granted your good intentions. Nurture them. Every day we can make the intention that what am I going to do today to make that change? What is the strategy that I am going to continue to follow? We have to understand that we have the spark of the divine within us that we can reach for every day to make that intention. Don't take it for granted. Nurture it. What would it mean if every day you set your intention and lived your life by the intention that day? We walk around in the fog many days. We wake up in the morning, we go through our routines, we get done. But what would it mean to set an intention every day and live by that intention? And that intention is that we have to change the power structure in this country now. And what does it mean to befriend our pain? We live in a country that pathologizes our pain. We live in a country that people turn to addiction because of our pain. Every kind of addiction, drug addiction, shopping addiction, working addiction, sex addiction, money addiction. This is a country that encourages us not to feel our pain, but to run away from our pain. And I say to you, your pain is a measure of your humanity. If you're not feeling pain, there is something wrong with you. If you're not feeling pain about what's happening to this environment, there's something wrong with you. If you're not feeling pain about what's happening to poor people in this country, there's something wrong with you. If you're not feeling pain about what's happening to black and brown people, there's something wrong with you. We need to feel our pain. That is what our humanity is. What is happening now is not right. And we have to feel our pain, and let's tap into it and know that that is part of our motivation. That to stay alive, our greatest danger in some ways is numbness. When we become numb to our pain, we stop acting. We have to remember to be alive, and to be alive is to feel that pain and to say, I am going to continue going forward. The fourth gift is radical solidarity. This is a time where we have to understand our solidarity not only with all humans, but with all beings. As our Native American brothers, sisters, and say, with all the four-leggeds, with all the plants as well. This is the time that we have to take care of all of creation, all of God's creation as at risk. And radical solidarity means we stand with every person and every being that's at risk and in pain. That is our job now. Radical solidarity is what's called for in times of radical uncertainty. And our last gift is the immensity of time. Human beings have been around for 200,000 to 300,000 years in this form. We stand on the shoulders, on the achievements of our ancestors of blood, our ancestors of spirit. The work that we do is for those future beings who are not born yet. Somewhere earlier in the week, we were with Pastor Carla, who said, the work I do is for the future beings. Imagine that. I love people who aren't even born yet. Open your heart to that. We love people who aren't even born yet. And that's why we do this work. For those who are not yet even born. That is the immensity of time. We reach back to our ancestors, and we can do what we do because of what they did, and we do what we do for those who aren't even born yet. We live in this moment, and we take with us the past, and we bring in the future at the same time. So for the sake of all that is past and all that is future, vote and bring everybody you know out to the polls on Tuesday. Thank you.
I think we need another song. Does someone have a song they want to share? A song in your heart this morning? I know somebody's got something, because I've heard y'all singing. It's probably good. Sounds like I'm getting a ticket for not paying my parking. And maybe some of y'all, so pay attention. Down here, if you're parked along here, and you haven't paid your parking ticket yet, you might want to go pay for additional parking. Oh, Dawn's gonna, maybe Pastor Dawn, you're gonna come up and sing? Come up.
Can't turn around. We come this far by faith. We come this far by faith. We come this far by faith. Because we are leaning on the Lord. And we are trusting in His holy word. Because God has He's never failed me yet. Oh, can't turn around. We come this far by faith. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. walking down Freedom Road. Come on, ain't gonna let nobody turn us around, turn us around, turn us around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn us around. Keep on walking, keep on talking, walking down Freedom Road. Come on, folks, we ain't gonna let nobody stop us from voting, stop us from voting, stop us from voting. Ain't gonna let nobody stop us from voting. Keep on walking, keep on talking, walking down Freedom Road. Ain't gonna let nobody stop us from voting, stop us from voting, stop us from voting. Ain't gonna let nobody stop us from voting. Keep on walking, keep on talking, walking down Freedom Road.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Don. Now we'll invite Pastor Andrea Brown from Grandview Church.
Well, I'm from Lancaster County, born and bred. I grew up here and I know the religious climate here, and I know the religious climate particularly of white Christians here. Boy, what a mixed bag. We walk in the midst of this, and I want to tell you two stories today. One 3 blocks this way, one 3 blocks this way. So 3 blocks from here this way. I used to volunteer at the Planned Parenthood clinic that was there. I was a volunteer there at the time that that clinic was firebombed. Now that clinic never performed a single abortion, but people came there for health care of all sorts. And somebody firebombed it. And that person was never caught. But we know what that person was like. If that person was like the people who have done other violence around that very same thing. That person was white and male and Christian. That person believed the same lies that we're hearing from white Christian nationalists now. And he did violence. But the people who worked in that clinic, including one who's now a member of my church, were many of them Christian too. And they did the work they did in faith. Sometimes we believe the lie, especially here in Lancaster County, that all Christians believe those white Christian nationalist lies, that all Christians practice a faith that is prejudicial and looks nothing like the life of Christ, who we claim to follow. But the testament of the lives you see before you here today is that Christianity has a different flavor here too. We are not alone in feeling that everyone deserves the right to have their vote counted. That voting is a sacred act, that we are better off when people of other faiths have power in our county, when our schools are able to teach about true history and to read the works of writers of color, for students who are LGBTQ to hear their own stories being echoed and to have their rights and indeed their lives protected in their public schools. So we are not alone in that. And the other part of that story, 3 blocks this way, is the grave of Thaddeus Stevens, one of the greatest heroes of Lancaster County. He was a radical Republican, and he was scorned and hated. So, you know, what is the name and the shape of an identity and a calling of a person perceived as white who wants to live lovingly with all? How do we do that? How do we, who have high levels of privilege, effectively confront and change systems that harm people of color, that harm Jewish people and Muslim people, and then ultimately act to the detriment of us all? Sadly, there aren't a ton of historic examples to follow, but Thaddeus Stevens is one of those, someone from right here. We are blessed to have this fine example, this brave example of how to stand up and do what is right. Now, he didn't do that with no opposition. You know, Rabbi Liebling said it doesn't matter how we feel, it doesn't matter how we're treated, we're supposed to keep standing up. Here's what an Alabama editor wrote about Thaddeus Stevens, and I'm condensing quite a bit. This Alabama editor wrote, "I have no wish to wrong even this wicked man, Stevens, whose terrible wretchedness gapes frighteningly at him from the hopeless grave upon whose brink he stands." He was elderly at that time. This Stevens, this patricide and murderer, he was not, this immorality of hate and infamy for eternity of unutterable woe, this traitor who gives new and damnable meaning to treason, this malicious, pitiless enemy of an entire nation, this misanthrope whose curses shall be written upon his loathed tomb. Well, you get the idea. Remember, this guy started out saying, "I don't mean to do any wrong to this wicked man." Well, I'd hate to see what it would say if you did. This is the perfect example of, filing under that line where Jesus says, "Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and say all manner of evil against you for my sake." Too many of us white folks have been content to be quiet, to just avoid the conversations that we should be having with our cousins, that we should be having in our churches and our synagogues and our mosques. We must speak to one another about this. There were some pro-slavery forces who had a grudging admiration for this man, Thaddeus Stevens. "Our enemy," wrote Hal Clark, meaning the radical Republicans with whom Stevens caucused, "has a general now. This man is rich, therefore we cannot buy him. He does not want higher office, therefore we cannot allure him. He is not vicious, therefore we cannot seduce him. He is in earnest. He means what he says. He is bold. He cannot be flattered or frightened." Stevens was a visionary, like Isaiah. Over and over, his biographer, Fawn Brody, described his uncanny insight that helped him see things that others could not perceive. He is a good role model for us because he learned from his mistakes. His first trial before the Pennsylvania Supreme Court had him defending a slaveholder against whom a woman, Charity Butler, argued for her freedom on the basis of a Pennsylvania law that she was right to think might protect her. On behalf of his client, Stevens argued for a very strict interpretation of this law, and he won the case, and thus she was sent back into slavery. And he hated it. He recognized what he had done. And after that, he did not take such clients. And he quickly won equal and greater success defending, for instance, the free black people arrested for standing up for their own rights at the Christiana uprising, as well as other African Americans at risk of cross-border kidnappings caused by the hateful fugitive slave law. It is worth us learning from the example of this brave ancestor of ours and making heroes of the right sort of people. We must do this work whether we are hated or loved, whether we are fearful or feeling bold. We need to find the courage because this moment demands it. Lives are at stake.
And now we'll hear from Bishop Dwayne Royster, the Executive Director of Power Interfaith. Bishop Dwayne, welcome to Lancaster.
Thank you, Pastor Lanahan, and to all of you that have gathered here today. We are so grateful for your presence, and to all the people of Lancaster that might be listening to us for just the season. Please get out and vote this season. It is your ability to have a say in your local, state, federal, school board governments that exist in your community. If you want to have a different community, then you need to get out to vote. Let me just add this to all of the speakers that have come up here today. First, I thank you. You all were hitting them out of the park. I wish you were at the Philly Stadium last night. They could have used your help in a big way to be able to get to a place of winning. Beloved, we're gathering on this Freedom Express bus tour because we want to have a conversation across the state of Pennsylvania about the evils of white Christian nationalism. But it's not just about white Christian nationalism. It's really more about how do we build a vision for a state where all of us are able to thrive.
Yes, yes, yes. All of us thriving.
There's been a lie that's been perpetuated over and over again in this country and in this state in particular, that only a few of us are able to do well at one time, and that all of us can't do that. There are people actually that are funding organizations that are basically trying to create a permanent underclass in the state of Pennsylvania, in our communities, mostly black and brown communities, poor rural communities, trying to create a permanent underclass so that they can stay perpetually rich. We have a problem. We have a challenge that we have to take a hold of. There are folks like Jeff Yaz that are using his billions of dollars to fund a bunch of nonprofits and think tanks and communication firms that are trying to tell a story about why public school children should not be able to get the education that they need, about putting money in other places so that we don't have the resources to make sure that every community is able to thrive in the state of Pennsylvania. And the reason that folk like that are able to have a say, oversized say in our government isn't just because of their money. It's because there are those of us that will not get up off our behinds and get out to go vote on Tuesday, or bring their ballot down to the county office, or should have dropped it in the mail a long time ago if you were going to do that. Don't do it now. Bring it to the ballot box. Bring it to the county office. But the reality is that when we often say we don't feel like our vote counts, that's because you're not encouraging yourself, your neighbors, your friends to go vote as a block. The reality that we live in this country right now is that there are more of us that want freedom, more of us that want liberation, more of us that want to be able to thrive than those that don't want us to thrive. But we are so busy listening to what they're saying, how they're trying to change our minds, how they're trying to prevent us from getting out to vote, getting out to be able to see hope, to be able to be hope in our communities. They're trying to crush us and use fear to prevent us from getting out to vote. But I'm here today to tell you that if you are afraid to get out to vote, you don't have to be afraid. That we are here to stand with you from all across the state of Pennsylvania. We've come both near and far, whether we're from Philly or from Allentown, whether we're from Lancaster or Washington County, whether we're in Pittsburgh or whether we're in Gettysburg. We have come to say without a shadow of a doubt, you, my siblings, have the capacity to change the damn world that you are living in right now.
Yes, say that.
Far too long, we have been told that we don't matter and we don't count. But the one way to level the playing field is to use your vote. Somebody will say, well, I live in a county where my political party is in the minority. But if you get out and vote, if you talk to your neighbors, you would begin to find out that there are more of them that are with you than those that are against you. Get out and vote. There are those that are sitting in the middle waiting for somebody to come knock on their door and give them a reason to get out and vote. Go talk to them. Some of them are sitting next to you in the pews. Some of them are sitting next to you in your office cubicles. Some of them are sitting next to you in your classrooms. Some of them are riding the bus with you. Some of them are walking down the street with you. Say hello to somebody and ask them if they're going to vote this season and if they are voting so that everybody can thrive. It's a sin that we are in Lancaster County, and the commissioners in this community don't believe it's important enough to have a ballot box so you can drop your ballot off. It is a sin that we have politicians in the state that think that there should be less voting rights instead of more voting. It's a sin. They are the minions of the devil himself. I heard a preacher say that we come against powers and principalities, rulers of darkness in high places. If the message coming out is not for everybody to thrive, then it's contrary to the will of God.
That's right.
If the message that they are talking about only lifts up one community and doesn't lift up every community, it's against the will of God.
That's right.
If the message that they're giving says that they and the politicians get to decide what happens to women's bodies, it's against the will of God. Y'all missed that one.
Freedom of choice.
If that's right. Thank you. You got the message. If they're saying that they're going to determine who you can love, then it is against the will of God. We're gathered here, it's multiple faith traditions. We're Christian, we're Jewish, we're Muslim, we're Unitarian Universalists, we're Society of Friends, we're ethical humanists. In the Christian tradition, we're the black church and the white church. We're the Anabaptists and the Protestant. Might be some Catholics amongst us too, amen. We're black and white, Latin, Asian Pacific Islander, indigenous. We're biracial. We're gay, we're lesbian, we're bisexual, we're transgender, we're non-binary. We are rich. We are wannabe rich. We're working class. We are the poor. We are the sub-poor. But when we all stand together and imagine that all of us have a right to dignity, all of us have a right to respect, all of us have a right to have our voices heard, all of us have a right to be able to have a roof over our heads, all of us have a right to have food on our table, all of us have a right to have safe water to drink. All of us should have a right to be able to cast our ballot. All of us should be able to walk down the street in safety. All of us should be able to put our ballots in a ballot box. All of us should be able to get together and decide what our democracy is going to look like when all of us choose to get together. And we recognize that our diversity is a blessing and not a curse. When we recognize that God created us all different so that we can come together and value each other and respect one another and learn from one another. I don't know about you. I don't want to eat the same thing every day. Sometimes I want Chinese food. Sometimes I want Ethiopian food. Sometimes I might go up in Good and Plenty and get some PA Dutch food. But somewhere along the line, I want something different every day. If I can appreciate the food, why can't I appreciate the people? As I was riding, we've been riding, I don't know, we've probably done 1,600 miles across the state already, wrapping up in Harrisburg tomorrow. But I was looking at the leaves on the trees as we were going down the highway. And actually, I posted this on my social media. And I'll say that there's no place as beautiful as Pennsylvania when fall foliage hits. The browns and the auburns and the oranges and the greens and the different colors that exist there. And as I was looking and people taking pictures and posting on social media, they were talking about how pretty it was. And I'm like, why is it that we can celebrate the different colors on the leaves on the tree,
My Lord.
but we can't celebrate the different colors in our communities?
My Lord.
Somebody say amen on that one.
Amen.
Why is it we can talk about how beautiful that is, but when it comes to our neighborhood, we want everybody white, we want everybody black, we want everybody brown, we want everybody looking like Asian Pacific? Why can't we find a way to work together? The reality is that we cannot change this world until we all agree to come to the table together, until we agree to sit down together as equals at the table, and then wrestle with one another to create a more perfect union. This union is not anywhere near perfect. This county's got a long way to go. This state's got a long way to go. But it won't be what it needs to be until all the people get up and say, this is what we want. This is the direction we want to move in, so that we are all able to thrive. Pennsylvanians, please don't wake up tomorrow morning feeling like you're already living in hell and not taking advantage of the tools that have been given to you to be able to create heaven here in Pennsylvania right now. You have the tools. You have the ability. Let's change the damn state, and let's do something about it right now. God bless you, everybody. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Bishop, for your powerful words. Everybody feeling powerful this morning?
Yes.
Are you powerful?
Yes.
Are we powerful?
Yes.
Are we going to change Lancaster?
Yes.
Are we going to change Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Yes, we are. Here's the Freedom Express, everybody. Woo! Listen, next we have, we're going to sing our way out of here in a minute as the bus gets loaded up and heads on to the next stop of our day in Lancaster. A reminder that we are at Ebenezer Baptist Church for a lunch and learn session with Dr. Greg Carey from Lancaster Theological Seminary on the threats of white Christian nationalism and what we are doing about it here in Lancaster, how we are organizing against it, and how we are organizing for a thriving Lancaster. Okay, so that's happening next at Ebenezer Baptist. This evening, we want to invite you all downtown at 7 o'clock on Penn Square in Lancaster. There's a concert with the Music for Everyone Community Chorus, followed by an interfaith prayer vigil. We'd love for all of you to come back out this evening on Penn Square for a show of solidarity, prayer, to demonstrate to Lancaster County what it is to be a multiracial, interfaith, loving, powerful movement for justice. Pastor Lyndon Noonan is going to lead us in some sending music.
Well, we've had a lot of words, and we've had a lot of really good words, and I would like to invite us to end by proclaiming, by saying, by singing that we will not be silent in the face of pain. This is a song that comes out of the Poor People's Campaign. I saw that Reverend Dr. William Barber has a fabulous letter about listening to the pain of those who are poor in the USA Today newspaper this morning. I'm going to sing a little bit, and you'll say, I'll say, somebody's hurting my sister and it's gone on far too long, and you're going to say far too long, and then we'll say far too long, and then at the end you'll sing, we won't be silent anymore. Somebody's hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long. Yeah, it's gone on far too long. Can I have some clapping? Yeah, it's gone on far too long. Somebody's hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. We'll take it up. Somebody's hurting our children, and it's gone on. Yeah, it's gone on. Well, it's gone on. Somebody's hurting our children, and it's gone on. And we won't be silent anymore. We're fighting for our democracy, 'cause it's gone on. Yeah, it's gone on. Well, it's gone on. We're fighting for democracy 'cause it's gone on. And we won't be silent anymore. Somebody's hurting our siblings and it's gone on. Sound angry and it's gone on. Well, it's gone on. Somebody's hurting our siblings and it's gone on. And we won't be silent anymore. And we won't be silent anymore. Amen. As we leave this place, we ask for all that guides us, our spirit guides, to guide our feet as we leave this sacred and holy ground. Guide our feet while we run this race. Guide our feet while we run this